Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring Love, Sex, and Awakening from Tantra to Spiritual Ecstasy. It's by Margot Anand.
That's right. And we're really going to unpack Anand's own experiences and the sort of principles she uncovered through them. It's quite a journey.
And Margot Anand, she's a huge name in Tantra, isn't she? A real authority.
Oh, absolutely.
Eh,
Internationally known. Her
yeah.
books are bestsellers, and her teaching style is, well, it's unique.
How so?
It's this blend. You get French erotic humor, but also American pragmatism, and then deep Indian mysticism woven in. It really resonates with people.
Yeah, I can see how that mix would be compelling. And she didn't just write about it, she created structures, right? The Love and Ecstasy training.
Exactly. And the Sky Dancing Tantra Institutes, they're all over the world now. It's very much about the experience, not just theory.
So this book, it's personal then, her own stories.
Very personal. She shares these episodes from her life, and they're not strictly chronological. It's more about the emotional impact, the insight she gained from each one.
Okay. And some of these stories, they sound pretty wild, almost hard to believe sometimes.
They can seem that way, but she presents them as completely real experiences. And for her, they hold these important messages, these kernels of wisdom about, well, the core themes.
Love, Sex, and Awakening. The title says it all, really.
Precisely. She's quite clear about her intention, too. She wants to tackle sexual ignorance, she calls it, and the suffering that comes from it.
And show how these three things, love, sex, spirit, are actually deeply connected.
Yes. It's about seeing that interconnectedness.
If you glance at the contents, you see the progression. Starts in Paris, first lovemaking.
Moves to California, exploring orgasm.
Cool.
Her work becomes popular.
And she even gets into the dark side of Tantra, so it's not all just bliss and light.
No, she's not afraid to look at the complexities. It's a very comprehensive account of her path.
Okay, let's dive in then. Starting at the beginning, Paris, her first love.
Right, so the setting is Paris. She paints this picture of her background, very high society, very structured.
But she felt drawn to something else.
Yeah, she secretly longed for what she called the underbelly, something more raw, more real than the polished world she was in.
And then Richard enters the scene. He sounds like the total opposite of her background.
Completely. She describes him as this crazy, wild, bohemian American painter and flamenco guitarist. You really sense the powerful pull, this deep infatuation.
A real departure for her.
Totally. And she tells this specific story about a debutante ball. Very formal, very much her expected world.
But the real action happens later.
Yes, her secret meeting with Richard afterwards. She even remembers these really specific sensory details, like his smell, resin, tobacco, sweat. Very earthy, very different.
And she's wrestling with things internally at this point.
Oh, definitely. There's this conflict, societal expectations about virginity, her upbringing, versus her own growing desires, her sense of self-respect. It's a real internal tug-of-war.
So when they finally make love, it's more than just physical for her.
Much more. She describes it as this profound awakening, a liberation, really. Physically, mentally, it was a breakthrough.
She even contrasts it with her father.
Yes, her powerful, patriarchal father. Making love with Richard felt like breaking free from that kind of structure, that influence.
And the climax. That sounds like where things went really deep.
That's the pivotal moment.
What?
It wasn't just intense pleasure. She describes going beyond her body.
Into that luminous field.
Exactly. A space where everything felt connected, timeless. She had this sudden, direct understanding.
Of what?
That her true nature was freedom, pure consciousness, that she was part of this divine creation. It was a massive insight.
Wow. So not just a good orgasm, but a spiritual revelation.
Absolutely. A direct hit of interconnectedness. And that experience really became her compass, didn't it? It set the direction for everything else.
It shows how physical pleasure can potentially open these doors to something much bigger.
And that first experience became the foundation for how she later understood Tantra. Tantra is this weaving of energy and consciousness.
Leading back to that infinite nature she touched.
Right. And she suggests these experiences, maybe glimpses of them, are more common during orgasm than people realize.
This cosmic orgasm, she called it, that launched her quest.
It did. A decades-long search to understand and maybe recapture that state. That's what drove her towards Tantra.
So Tantra, for her, starts with presence. Making sex sacred.
Fundamentally, yes.
Yeah.
Presence.
Yeah.
And seeing sexuality as a sacred pathway for inner awakening.
Which brings us to a practical takeaway she offers right near the start.
Yeah, the art of being present during lovemaking. Really focusing on sensations, on the breath.
Resisting that urge to rush ahead, to think about the goal.
Exactly. just being there. She quotes the Radiant Sutras, maintain awareness at the very source of desire. Stay with the feeling itself.
Okay, so after that very outward relational experience, she does a complete 180, it seems. Sensory deprivation.
Yeah, totally different kind of exploration. This was at Quieter, an institute in London, influenced by John Lilly's isolation tank work.
Facing the inner world head-on.
Pretty much. Confronting her own psyche, her demons, as she put it, with absolutely no external input.
And the conditions sound austere.
Extremely. Total darkness, silence, just water and grapes for a week in this slightly bleak seaside hotel in Suffolk, off-season.
Not exactly a fun retreat.
No. And she even mentions her lover at the time, Jakob Lind. He pops up unexpectedly at the end. They had this very magnetic connection, apparently.
Does she know what she was getting into?
Well, she admits she initially thought of it as a kind of holiday, just doing nothing. Her neighbor was completely baffled by the idea.
I can imagine. So what happened in the dark and quiet?
Her mind went into overdrive, basically. All these internal dialogues, distractions, imaginary chats with John Lilly, her inner school teacher.
Where's her mind just trying to stay busy?
Exactly. It doesn't like stillness. But then she had a realization, a shift in how she related to her mind.
From enemy to ally?
Sort of. Yeah. She started this practice of just acknowledging thoughts when they came up, thanking them even, but not fighting them, not getting hooked.
Just observing, accepting.
Yes. That was key. Realizing that fighting the mind just gives it more energy. Acceptance was the way through.
And she mentions alpha breathing, leading to bliss.
A feeling of bliss, timelessness, even this sense of nobody being beyond the physical form. Pretty profound states.
So over the week, did things quiet down?
Yeah, she describes impatience dissolving, more acceptance of just being, staying with a slow breathing, witnessing the thoughts drift by.
And the end was strange. A gong, a phone call.
Very mysterious.
Yeah.
A distant gong sounds, then a phone rings in the empty hotel, and it's Chekhov. Perfect timing somehow. Suggests a connection beyond the ordinary.
Wow. But the inner state remained.
Apparently so. That sense of inner spaciousness stayed with her. Even after the call, she just quietly went back to London.
And she connected with some interesting people afterwards.
Yeah, Hector, who trained with Ida Rolf of Rolfing fame, and R.D. Lang, the psychiatrist, they seem to understand and support her deep dive into her inner madness.
Now, the obvious question comes up here, doesn't it? Who has time for a week of sensory deprivation?
Right. She tackles that directly. That feeling of the inner tiger, of responsibility, always demanding attention.
Her approach was to negotiate with it.
Kind of. Promise that you'll get back to the tasks, but carve out that time for yourself first. Start small, maybe, then extend it. She found things still got done.
That's encouraging. Any quick tips she offers for finding that silence in daily life?
Yeah, things like actually scheduling doing nothing time. Visualizing the mind like a kitten you gently put in a box to rest. Relaxing with the breath, acknowledging thoughts.
And listening between the thoughts.
Yes, tuning into the silence underneath the mental chatter. That's a key practice.
Okay, so from inner space to outer space, or at least altered states, LSD comes next.
Yeah, another big shift. This is upstate New York. She encounters Timothy Leary. She's exploring consciousness through psychedelics now, part of the whole acid revolution.
A very different path of exploration.
Totally. And she meets this guy, Asat Mitra. Claims to be a student of yoga and Tantra.
And he introduces her to more concepts.
He does. Talks about chakras, these energy centers. We'll hear more about those. He links them to spiritual transformation, which really piques her interest in Tantra again.
Right. Connects back to that first experience.
Could Tantra be the way to stabilize that awakened state she felt? That was her question.
So she takes LSD with Asat as a guide, but it sounds weird. Telepathic connection, separate rooms.
Yeah, it sounds unconventional. She was definitely skeptical at first.
But she did it.
She did. He offered to guide her for free, which maybe raised a slight flag for her. But she was deeply curious about Tantra by this point, exploring that path of channeling energy through the chakras to transcend the ego.
What was the LSD experience itself like?
She describes that feeling, again, altered perception, expanded awareness, feeling beyond the body. Another form of transcendence, chemically induced this time.
But something problematic happened with Asat.
Yes, there was an incident of unwanted sexual touch, which is obviously serious.
How did she handle that?
Her choice was interesting. She decided to label him a rascal and not dwell on the negativity, wanting to focus on the value of her journey overall. But she absolutely acknowledges the vulnerability LSD creates, the potential for manipulation.
And that leads her to reflect on Tantra in the West.
Yeah, those two options she saw emerging. Genuine spiritual guidance versus, unfortunately, sexual exploitation. A really important caution.
So after these intense explorations, she pivots again, back to Paris, then New York, and journalism.
Surprisingly, yes.
Yeah.
She finds she has a knack for it. Ends up directing a new department for Paris Match in New York, covering the American counterculture. She was thrilled by this extraordinary cultural breakthrough.
And her first big assignment, Woodstock. Wow.
Imagine. Right in the thick of it. She describes the massive scale, the feeling of love, freedom, documenting something she felt was truly changing the culture.
And she even helped people having bad trips there.
Yeah, drawing on advice from R.D. Laing, enter their world, meet them where they are, shows real compassion.
It's interesting how she contrasts that idealistic use of LSD with things like the CIA's M-culture experiments.
Right, the dark side of mind-altering substances control versus liberation.
She also brings in the historical context, like Soma in ancient Hindu texts.
Suggesting that ecstatic substances have a long history in spiritual traditions, which contrasts sharply with modern legality around things like LSD or ecstasy.
Raises questions, doesn't it? But she brings it back to the body's own potential.
Yes, our natural capacity for pleasure. Lovemaking itself creates this biochemical cascade.
Hormones, neurochemicals.
Exactly. And tantric practice, she argues, can harness that energy, channel it up to the brain, leading to more stable ecstatic states naturally.
Okay, so back in Paris after the U.S. adventures, she starts this practice of cutting the cords. What's that about?
It's about acknowledging these energetic links we form in relationships. Through intimacy, shared emotions. These ties can linger even after you separate.
So the practice is to consciously release them, reclaim your energy.
Exactly. A kind of energetic hygiene, you could say.
And then another intense connection happens. Miles.
Yes, a Black American musician. She describes it as instant love at first sight. Even stronger, she says, than meeting Gekov. Just bam.
That immediate soul recognition.
That's how she puts it. His eyes piercing her soul. A mutual feeling. Undeniable attraction.
And he was a musician. Charming.
Jazz band called Mockingbird. Strong physical pull between them. Seems like a really passionate, fast-moving romance.
They even got married informally.
They did in New York. She had this aversion to legal marriage, the idea of being a wife based on her parents, saw it as a loss of freedom, so they did their own thing.
And around this time, the Erica School comes into the picture. Oscar Icasso.
Right. Another phase of intense self-work. Erica was focused on stripping down the ego. She dove right in.
They used the Enneagram, didn't they?
Yes. And she recounts Oscar giving her this reading. She calls it embarrassingly accurate. He identified her as a Venge, number 8.
What did that entail? What resonated with her?
Things like swinging between following rules and rebelling, a drive to uncover injustice, valuing strength, being protective, and
The extreme sexual lasciviousness.
she admits he wasn't wrong about that one. It was a sharp insight into her patterns.
But then something difficult happens with Miles during an Erica exercise.
Yeah, a role-playing scenario involving spanking that went wrong. Unexpected violence from Miles. It was disturbing for her.
Raise questions about power, maybe race.
It seemed to. They did talk it through afterward, negotiated some kind of resolution, but it clearly left a mark. A troubling moment.
And that leads to another turning point for her, doesn't it? A meditation practice.
Yes, a shaking meditation at Erica.
Yeah.
It was incredibly powerful for her. She felt this release, this detachment from Miles.
A realization that the relationship was ending.
A clear knowing. Sadness, yes, but also clarity. Acceptance.
And that's what prompts the trip to India, to meet Osho.
Directly. The meditation was the catalyst. She felt this strong pull towards Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who later became Osho. Drawn by the power she heard his meditations had.
Miles wasn't keen, though.
Not at all. Very skeptical of gurus, saw them as potentially manipulative.
But her inner call was stronger.
Much stronger. The call to meet a mystic, she says. It outweighed the relationship. That difference in their paths led to their separation.
And she used that cord-cutting practice again.
She did. Breath, sound ho, and intention to reclaim her energy from that connection.
So off to India. First impressions of Bombay.
Intense. A land of enlightenment, but also bursting with human passion. Sensory overload, but she felt open to it. Then she traveled to Pune, to the ashram.
And she wanted to meet Osho personally. A darshan.
Yes, she got an appointment for the evening darshan. Her first meeting was profound. She felt the world disappear, this immediate, powerful connection. And she talked about her difficulty letting go of Miles.
Then came a Vipassana retreat, silent meditation, and her mind. It got noisy.
Extremely noisy. These vivid, often violent mental movies, she calls them, often involving Miles and another woman, Maya. She felt totally out of control, frustrated.
She asked the facilitator, Pradeepa, about it.
And Pradeepa offered this perspective. It's the psyche healing, the negativity circusing to be released, like clearing out an infection. Don't suppress it.
But it kept escalating. The mental assassinations.
They did. Got so intense she felt she had to ask Osho for help directly.
What did she do?
Wrote in a letter, pouring out her turmoil, her longing for peace.
And his response?
Amazingly simple. Your mind is mischievous. Let it play. Don't get involved. Just be a watcher.
Just be a watcher. What effect did that have?
A huge, unexpected shift.
Yeah.
The violence in her mind just subsided and was replaced by laughter.
Laughter.
Yeah. She realized she'd been fighting her mind, trying to force it into submission. His words gave her permission to just observe.
And that led to the laughing darshan.
Oh, that sounds incredible. This uncontrollable wave of universal laughter washing through her shook her to the core, left her feeling light, joyful, full of humor.
She even had a vision. The pizza mama.
Yeah, this funny image reminding her not to take life quite so seriously. A real gift.
So after that, she decides to take sannyas, become his disciple.
Yes, a big step. She received her new name, Anand Margot, the way to bliss.
What was the key learning from that whole India period for her?
Two main things, I think. Realizing the call to awakening was stronger now than the call to be in a relationship, and understanding the difference between loneliness and contented aloneness.
That's a subtle but important difference.
Very. And she shares a practice for cultivating that lightness, forgiving inner contractions, especially grief, by feeling into the heart space.
So after these personal transformations, she starts to move towards teaching herself. She went to Mahabaleshwar with other therapists.
That's right, to deepen their Tantra understanding. They even did this symbolic surrender of their existing knowledge to be open to more.
And then Osho asks her to lead a Tantra group, even though she felt inexperienced.
Exactly. A total surprise. She protested, said she didn't know how.
What was his advice?
Just call on him inwardly for guidance when she needed it. Trust that connection. Forget her previous training for now.
Must have been confusing, balancing independence and surrender.
A real edge for her. And that first group sounds like chaos. Pure, raw emotion erupting, anger, resentment, people hitting pillows.
Wow. And the story about Gita regressing to a baby state?
Yeah, that was intense. Anand had to respond intuitively, creating this scene of trust and acceptance to help her heal that early wound.
And that's where Osho's phrase, love is the only therapy, really clicked for her.
Exactly. It wasn't about technique, but the quality of presence, the loving acceptance.
So these groups involved a lot of deep emotional work, rebirthing, anger release.
All of that. Exploring prejudices around gender, sexuality. It was dynamic.
Wild yet respectful, she called it.
Yes. Her role was creating structures on the fly, responding to what was emerging, like with Catherine.
The woman who struggled with pleasure due to trauma.
Right. The group did this exercise, sensual pleasuring by women, blindfolded. Then a very gentle, non-demanding encounter with a man, Jerry. It was a step towards healing for her.
And this all ties back to Osho's view of Tantra. Sex is the first step.
Yes, the latter, from sex to superconsciousness, reclaiming sexuality as the starting point on the spiritual path.
She notes she adapted her methods later in the West, though.
Sure, culturally sensitive adjustments, but the core principles of transformation remain the same.
Okay, moving into some unexpected lessons. There's a funny story about a fur coat.
Yes. Needing to project this princess image, borrowing a fancy Russian fur coat from her friend Eliane Sokolov, just to impress a publisher and get a book deal.
Shows how the material world works sometimes, doesn't it?
It does. Then she describes something much more intimate, a sky-dancing Tantra initiation night with two male lovers, Ariel and Aman.
2 men, 1 woman. That sounds complex.
Very. She stresses how rare supportive male friendship is in that kind of dynamic. The key she found was the woman consciously sharing her attention equally, preventing jealousy.
It was emotionally intense.
Extremely. She went from feeling like a powerful goddess to being incredibly vulnerable, but ultimately felt deeply loved and supported by both men.
And there were specific tantric practices, synchronized breathing.
Yes, with Ariel. And then this extraordinary moment she calls coming with God, marked by actual lightning and thunder outside.
Wow. A powerful synchronicity.
Felt like a confirmation. She also shares her idea about women having 7 levels of orgasmic potential.
Often needing longer lovemaking, maybe multiple partners?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Though she's clear that monogamy and different kinds of intimacy offer their own deep healing and satisfaction.
And she links this back to men sometimes not being trained in the arts of love. Maybe fearing female multi-orgasmic capacity.
It's a point she makes. For her, the love and support from these two men healed old wounds, allowed her to be more fully herself.
Requires letting go of ego, embracing trust.
Absolutely. Deep openness is needed for that kind of experience.
Then there's the yoni massage with Aman. That sounds incredibly intimate.
Deeply intimate and vulnerable. She highlights his honoring words, his gentle, slow technique that release so much tension.
A profoundly healing experience for her.
Yes, and she felt it held healing potential for many women. Huge gratitude for his sensitivity.
She also mentions a show and tell ritual, honoring genitals without touch.
Right. Using dance, contemplation of past relationships, self-appreciation, and bowing to the partner's sexual organs. A way to cultivate reverence and acceptance. She saw powerful healing happen in women's groups using similar rituals.
So as her teaching develops, she describes a session with Michael Sokolov, Slavic, focusing on gaze, sensing energy fields.
Yeah, shifting perception beyond just the physical body. They experienced embodying Buddha and Dakini archetypes, circulating energy between their sex centers.
Leading to oneness.
A profound sense of oneness. This seemed to connect with her visit to the Gimit Museum, seeing tantric art, yabyum images.
Could you explain yabyum a bit more?
It's a traditional Tibetan Buddhist practice. A male and female practitioner, often guided, merging energy and consciousness, typically visualized rising to the crown chakra. It's about transcending duality.
Sky dancing, she calls it.
That's her term for it. She then describes exchanging symbolic gifts with her partner Ravi, committing to their tantric practice together.
A crystal and a painting.
Yes, signifying their shared intention. And she details their yabyum practice. Opening chakras, conscious gestures, raising sexual energy with breath, sound, visualization.
Which led to riding the wave of bliss.
That simultaneous peak of shared orgasmic energy in the yabyum union. She believes skydancing Tantra makes this accessible through dedicated practice.
So orgasm isn't just physical release for her.
Not at all. It involves body, mind, spirit. It has the potential to become luminous bliss.
But she acknowledges challenges, especially for men becoming tantric partners.
Yes, the need for presence, attentiveness, willingness to learn. It's a different way of being intimate.
And she's honest about her own fluctuations and desire.
Very honest. The key is staying present with sensations without judgment. She even developed a technique for doing the man, overcoming insecurity about a partner's erection.
Realizing you're not responsible for their arousal.
Exactly. A big release for many people. Another key insight. Stay relaxed and high arousal for whole-body orgasm.
Relaxation is key.
Counterintuitive, maybe, but crucial for energy flow. She also talks about discovering major trigger points. Clio G spot for women, glans prostate for men.
And mini orgasms.
This idea of continuous flow of internal pleasure when these points are stimulated together.
She also brings in yin and yang energies in lovemaking.
Yes, the receptive yin and active yang. Finding balance is important. The receiver guides the giver guides the receiver. It's a dance.
And this connects to inner archetypes, inner man, inner woman.
Right, the animus and anima. Our partners often reflect these inner parts, shaped by our early experiences.
Exploring these can help free us from patterns.
That's the idea,
Yeah.
discovering hidden parts of ourselves, moving beyond parental dynamics. She mentions a yin-yang game, a role reversal exercise for this.
And finally, the Soham meditation for inner space in lovemaking.
Yes, bringing that mindful presence, that detachment from goals, into intimacy.
As she becomes a teacher, she reflects on the sacrifices involved.
She does. Emotional insecurity, letting go of a conventional future. It wasn't an easy path.
She also discusses ethical challenges, especially for teachers. Power dynamics, temptation.
Yes, referencing figures like Clinton and JFK. The difficulty for those in power. She actually declined to teach powerful men at Harvard Kennedy School.
Yeah.
Believed direct experience was essential, not just intellectual learning for this work.
And she outlines qualities of a true Tantra teacher.
A whole list. Prioritizing students, having personal experience, not imposing beliefs, no financial exploitation, humility, recognizing students as teachers, self-trust, practicing what you preach.
Avoiding the perfect example trap. Not using powers to impress.
Exactly. And not feeling responsible for the student's evolution. It's their journey.
She also directly addresses the shadow side sexual abuse.
Yes, stresses the importance of being informed, taking responsibility to help, make a difference. She shares her own encounters with exploitative gurus.
The need for critical thinking, even when drawn to surrender.
Crucial. She tells that story with a brochure promoting surrender, followed by revelations of abuse at that ashram. A stark warning.
So Tantra, yoga, powerful tools, but can be misused.
Absolutely. No guarantees. Can be used for awakening or for personal power. She notes cultural differences in approaching gurus, too.
Her main point is facing the truth about abuse and taking a stand.
Yes, create positive change. She mentions a prayer she uses in groups dedicating blissful practice to healing and protection.
And offers a compassion meditation, breathing in suffering, breathing out love.
Practice of active empathy. Taking on darkness, sending out light.
In her final reflections, she talks about how Tantra has evolved in the West.
Becoming more flexible, maybe more fun, with sexuality, often the main focus for healing guilt and shame.
Then she describes her own major awakening experience, a sound in her brain.
Yes, during a retreat, this sharp sound,
Yeah.
instantly, all resentment, anger, the sense of separate me just dissolved.
Replaced by what?
Fearlessness,
Joy.
deep interconnectedness, that tat tivamasi, thou art that understanding.
And her perception of reality changed afterwards.
Radically. Seeing the universe in a flower, seeing the chai wall with new eyes, maintaining that awakened state even in a chaotic Indian street.
That's incredible. And she was able to express love to her parents differently.
Yes, a deeply moving experience of gratitude and connection with them after that shift.
So less judgment of good me, bad me, more acceptance.
Acceptance and discernment. Maybe everything is perfect, even imperfection. A radical shift in perspective.
And her final practice? The circle of bliss.
Inviting all parts of herself, light and shadow, to a celebration. Acceptance. Seeing fear as constricted excitement, embracing all emotions for their lessons. She quotes the Radiant Sutras again, the one joyful in all forms.
So, bringing this deep dive to a close, we've really covered a lot from Margot Anand's Love, Sex, and Awakening, her experiences, her insights.
Yeah, it's a rich tapestry showing her view on how love, sex, and spiritual awakening really weave together.
And hopefully listeners can reflect on these ideas, presence, inner exploration, balancing energies.
And those crucial ethical points, too, especially when exploring spirituality and sexuality.
Anand's journey, it's full of challenges, but also profound discoveries. It can be inspiring, can't it, for our own explorations?
Definitely. It offers a map, perhaps, or at least some signposts for navigating these deeply interconnected parts of being human.
Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. How might embracing both the sensual and the spiritual in your own life? How might that lead to unexpected awakenings? A deeper understanding?
Something to sit with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you continue your own explorations.